So, how's your week been?
My week's been good. It's been hot down here and all that sort of jazz. Yeah,
Yeah,
fun with all that sweat.
yeah, I have to say, this year the summer heat did not come gradually like last year. June has been relatively fresh up until a certain day in which all of the heat just came crashing down like an unwanted cousin who's freeloading at your house.
Yeah, it's been exactly like that here. Luckily, I have not had any reason to go outside.
So,
Oh,
so if you people listening to this, you hear a reverb or a river noise in the background, that's probably my fan going full force right over here because it's too hot to do this otherwise.
yeah,
Apologies, but bear with us.
yeah. It's torture without a fan.
Also, it might not be a good idea do this whole podcast in a completely heated up room without any form of fanning. It's not good for the computer, for the gear, so to speak.
Yeah,
So yeah, it needs to be kept at a modicum 20-degree temperature if possible.
yeah. Very easy to overheat otherwise.
So it has been a rich week, rich in content, that is. Um, let's see. Oh, me and Devara, we finished up Tales, episode 1 Tales.
Yay, very
Uh,
nice.
yes, you should go check that out when you have the time because let me tell you, it's the death of storytelling. It goes out with a bang, a planetarian bang, like kapoosh. This was storytelling. Nice lad, if you get to know him, and now he's dead, gone.
Shucks. We all like that storytelling guy.
We held the funeral on Wednesday, so
Yeah.
there's that. Oh, and speaking of me and Devar, we started off a new Let's Play series of the second game of Mogeko, aka Deep Sea Prisoner. Since we covered the other two games that he made, this was the only one missing. And I can already tell you, we played 2 hours of it as of this recording.
And what's your overall opinion of it so far? Your opening impressions of it?
Apples.
Apples, indeed.
Apples.
Uh, yeah, go.
Well, it's a very, very not subtle reinterpretation of the Genesis and the Garden of Eden, and apples are literally scattered everywhere. And, but other than that, apples.
Apples.
So many apples. Apples everywhere. Oh, and
Apple
also,
pie?
yes, apple pies. So many apple pies.
Yummy.
The metaphorical kind for now.
The metaphorical kind. Ooh.
So, well, actually, when I say metaphorical, I mean there are literally apple pies in the game. But when I say metaphorical,
They stand for a metaphor sort of thing.
yes, I think the apple pies do stand for a metaphor.
They
Which-
stand for apple pies.
Yes, apple pies is a metaphor for apple pie. Anyway, you guys have to see that when it comes out, which might be actually before this podcast, so you might be already watching that. If you are not, you should, because honestly, I think that's one of our best works of commentary so far.
Alright.
Anyway, this week I've also been reading Homestuck.
Yeah. He's been wasting his life away just reading and reading. He hasn't been able to eat, sleep, or anything. Poor Madhog.
Well,
I'm so sorry for you.
Well, reading is one way to put it. Another way would be I've consumed a bit of Homestuck this week.
Very nice.
Okay, so the way I had in mind to do the Homestuck segment, which is coming later on tonight in the show, don't miss it, I was going to do a recap, more or less, and then an analysis as I go on. But the unique way in which this entity, for lack of a better word, this thing, is structured, presented in all of its multi-layered metatextual intricacies, it pretty much defies any attempt at a proper recapping. So, and basically, what I'm going to do, I'm going to spend the entirety of that segment to trying to explain what Homestuck is before even beginning to talk about its plot.
Yeah.
I haven't been this discombobulated since James Joyce's Ulysses, which, actually, come to think of it, Idea Channel has compared Homestuck with James Joyce's Ulysses in a video from a couple of years ago.
Okay. Cool.
This is going to be great for me.
Hooray!
But for now, let's begin with our feature presentation, which is presented
Calvin and Hobbes. Yay!
by Mr. Watterson.
Yeah. Bill Watterson.
Before that, welcome back, everyone, down in the depths of the pit, the paper pit. A podcast about comic books, a serious podcast about comics.
Hooray! Seriousness.
I am your host, Madhog Die Master, with a fan in the background.
And I am WhyBoy of Tungren, the guy who's not taking this as seriously and has a bunch of toys in his room.
Well, I don't have toys, with a plural, but I do have a Rainbow Dash plushie here. I'm going to keep her on my shoulder for the entire podcast. I will not do that because she's freaking hot. Oh god, I cannot. I cannot.
Oh yeah, she's so hot. MLP magic.
Oh, come on, man.
I'm sorry. Let's go into some real magic. The magic
of
good writing.
imagination.
I meant good writing and artwork. Come on, man. There's no imagination anywhere. The world is dead.
Well, if you read on the subtext of Calvin and Hobbes, then I might agree with you. But, yeah, there is a lot to talk about Calvin and Hobbes when the subtext is concerned. But before that, let's actually start from the beginning. WhyBoy, I do believe you have thoroughly prepared yourself for this, judging by all the stuff you have there. Why don't you show it up?
Yeah. Yes, I have one of my more favorite comic books collections. I have the authoritative Calvin and Hobbes, one of our bigger Calvin and Hobbes books I have. I have the documentary, Dear Mr. Watterson.
Oh, that one. Yeah.
Yeah, which has a bunch of guest cameos and all that, and it's just explaining these people's interactions with the Calvin and Hobbes series and how it just motivated them to do all sorts of things, whether it be acting, drawing, or any sort of thing. It's a very interesting sort of series. It would have been nice if Bill Watterson was in it, but as anyone who's read Calvin and Hobbes would know, Bill Watterson is living under a rock somewhere.
It's very elusive. Well, we all know Bill Watterson is not real. It's actually artificial intelligence concocted by the communist conspiracies and the JFK assassination and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Anyway, nobody knows what Bill Watterson looks like, or maybe if they do, they have forgotten. I don't know. There are even pictures about this guy on the internet.
Yeah, I have not seen any pictures of Bill Watterson really myself. But maybe there's something floating out there. But he's made it clear that he doesn't want his name and face out there, sort of thing. When Calvin Hobbes really made it into an animated series, he said no immediately and just kept it to the comics because he just
Which
wanted to
is
control his own
which is
thing.
a bit of a shame if you ask me. I mean, when everything they done with the Peanuts as far as animation is concerned has been very positive for the majority
Yeah.
of it, and Calvin and Hobbes is very much considered a, well, if there was ever a say a classification of the best comic strips in the US territory, Calvin and Hobbes has always been generally considered a close second to Peanuts.
Yeah.
So
It's definitely one of the top ones that most people would think of when they think comics.
honestly, I think that would work so well for a animated series, especially if it gets to look anything like The Loud House by Chris Savino, which
Yeah.
also looks like a comic strip brought up to an animated format, which is very nice to look at. So I want to imagine Calvin and Hobbes. It would look pretty well in that similar format. So
There was actually one animated short based on Calvin and Hobbes on one of the imagination scenarios that Calvin and Hobbes has in its books, the Spaceman Spiff sections, which was very well done. It was very big and grand, like it shows in the actual comics, and it's just Calvin waking up in this I forget the teacher's name, Wormwood or something like that, and he just wakes up in there. It's a very fun, short little thing. And I haven't seen it in a long time, but that's the only thing animated that I've ever seen of Calvin and Hobbes. And I'm not even sure if it's like an official sort of thing or is it a fan animated sort of thing.
the only animation that I've seen of Calvin and Hobbes is actually a short dancing animation. You can find it on YouTube easily, and that's my only exposure to an animated Calvin and Hobbes universe. So let's actually talk about Calvin and or Hobbes.
Yeah. Yeah, like, well, what's the actual story of Calvin and Hobbes for those who don't even know what Calvin and Hobbes is?
Well, more of a story, it's a premise. I mean, that's all comic strips really have. They have a premise and they run with it for about 26 years or more.
Exactly. So the premise is that we have a little boy named Calvin, and he's a hyperactive little brat of a child who's just going on fun adventures and all that, driving everybody crazy at home, at school, and everywhere. He's basically the atypical sort of just kid going to school. He has bullies, he gets bored at school, and he watches cartoons, does homework, and all that sort of.
He doesn't really have any friend, does he?
The only friend that he does have is Susie across the street, and even though he's not even real friends with her, he just says like, "Oh my God, you talk to me, screw you, no, stupid girl."
I think it's made abundantly clear that he kind of hates her, and vice versa. I think it's mostly mutual. I don't even know why they frequent each other, really.
Yeah, it's a mutual hate friendship.
Okay, and this actually it's part of the charm simultaneously, and also part of the recurring sadness that is the Calvin story. Hobbes is basically his only friend, and is literally a figment of his imagination brought to life by, again, his vivid creativity. He clearly represents a part of himself that it's almost like an ideal older brother. They had a semi-good relationship. They fight each other most of the times, rough and tumbling, and all that. He's also a bit more mature than Calvin, and knows things that a child at that age should not be able to know, which further my theory that Calvin is actually a brilliant kid in his own way that unfortunately cannot fit with the conformities of regular school systems and parenthood and all of that. I think he might be a bit autistic, a bit on the autistic spectrum, maybe Asperger and what have you. But it's all subtext for the most part, because the comic basically tends to distract you from thinking about the depressing stuff that this comic might be hiding with its rampant comedy. Yeah,
it's just a kid and his pet tiger just going on fun adventures sort of thing. And we go through like multiple different sort of storylines. We have Calvin versus his babysitter Rosalind. That's a reoccurring storyline that happens throughout the comic. We have Calvin and Susie going on their sort of misadventures, whether it be sitting at lunch with Calvin, eating something disgusting and grossing Susie out. We have Hobbes tackling Calvin to the ground every time he gets home from school.
Yeah, I remember a Sunday page in which we get a nature documentary description of Hobbes preparing to attack its prey. Like,
and just Calvin just freaking out and saying, "Oh God, no!" Gets whacked out of the house. Just on a base level, it's about the innocent adventures of just a bratty little kid who's got a big imagination. Calvin is a bratty kid.
It is.
Yeah.
It is a kid of an abnormal intelligence and creativity, but it also comes with the price of him being a bit unwieldy.
Yeah.
Unwieldy personality and what have you. You know, there is this funny fan theory about Calvin and Hobbes being the prequel to Fight Club. Calvin grows up to be Edward Norton and Hobbes becomes Brad Pitt, basically.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how a stuffed animal becomes a person.
Well, you know, your brain works in a different way when you're an adult. When you're a child, if you have an imaginary friend, it usually becomes some sort of an animal-like monstrosity, like Ding Dong from Inside Out.
Yeah.
Poor Ding Dong.
Oh no, he's dead. He's died. So horrible.
When you become an adult and you're exposed to the cynical reality that you live in, and you need an outlet from that reality, and you happen to be suffering from schizophrenia, then it makes sense that your other would look like the ideal male specimen that everybody wants to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So Calvin's ideal male specimen is a tiger.
No, it's Brad Pitt.
Oh, I see. I get you now.
Okay, that nonsense aside, that's a bit of a fun little anecdote to put in somewhere in the podcast. So, there is this comic, this relatively recent comic strip. It has only started 2, 3, 4 years ago. Heavenly Nostrils, which pretty much takes the same premise as Calvin and Hobbes, only instead of little boy with imaginary tiger friend, it's a little girl with a unicorn friend.
Ah, I see.
But there is a substantial difference that completely turns the premise upside down. The unicorn is not imaginary, it's 100% real, and everyone else can actually see her and interact with her.
Okay.
But and here's the kicker, they do not get surprised or even shocked because of a magic shield that's surrounding her, that it's basically preventing people from being shocked at the sight of unicorns. And I like that because it seems like it's making fun, it's satirizing what is essentially the nature of comic strips. And comic strips are known for taking the extraordinary and the unusual and turning it into something completely mundane.
Yeah.
By view of dry humor and comedy.
Yeah.
So I wanted to mention Heavenly Nostrils, 1 because it's pretty good, and 2 because it's one of the many descendants of Bill Watterson's Calvin and Hobbes.
Yeah.
Just to let you know how much was inspired directly or indirectly by Bill Watterson's work.
Yeah. Yeah, it just shows like how much of an impact it's had on so many people when like comics like that, just the spiritual successors of Calvin and Hobbes, just take off to become successful things as well, and just how all these books of Bill's has just still like stayed with people for all these years, all these big actors and everything. It's just pushing them forward to like take the comedy that they learned from Calvin and Hobbes, just move forward. And Calvin and Hobbes just also teaches kids that it's kind of all right to like think a little bit deeper about your comedy and all that, because it has like deeper talks in it that at first go over kids' heads, but once kids reread it and reread it, it becomes like more entrenched in them, makes them like expand their scope of the world. That's sort of what I feel like Calvin Hobbes is. It's sort of like the imagination of expanding your world through the eyes of a bratty kid.
You put it very eloquently. I don't really have anything to add to that.
Well, goodbye, everybody.
Well, yes, well, that was a relatively short review of Calvin and Hobbes, but then again, what's there to say more about Calvin and Hobbes that's not already been said by anyone, really?
Yeah.
It's a milestone in the American comic strips history.
Yeah.
It is a milestone in comics in general, and it connected with a lot of people throughout the world.
Yeah.
Timeless characters make for timeless stories. Simple as that.
Yeah. So I
So,
guess we can take the time now to basically recommend some sort of stuff they can do if they want to get their Calvin and Hobbes itch on. And I would
welcome everybody to the bonus update.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was first going to recommend the Calvin and Hobbes stuff first before we went to the bonus update, but thank you for jumping ahead of me. But this one is a must go to for any Calvin and Hobbes fan. Like, have you seen it before, Madhog? Like this documentary?
I have not. I tend to... I've seen a lot of documentaries in my life, and I have developed some sort of apathy towards the typical format of documentary. You know the one. Talking heads, the point of view of the author or the documentary superseding whatever notion of fact the quote-unquote documentary would pretend to have, where in fact it's all a matter of personal point of views no matter what. And I have a very complicated history with documentary. I've studied the format, I've studied the history from that one legendary film about the Eskimo person in the 1920s onto the very, very, very disgraceful legacy of Michael Moore that ruins us all. So I kind of dislike documentaries, but hey, I might still watch them if I'm interested in the topic, and that's definitely something I would like to see. I would not be enthused by it as a film, but definitely.
Yeah, documentaries are a very tricky format to do because in the way they're mostly designed, like I went to writing school and all that, and I basically had to write out sort of thing. You're basically writing out a very biased or like perspective sort of thing. Like, this is my perspective of what's happening.
The difference between a documentary and a fictional film is that they both have point of views. The point of views reflected by the makers of the films. But the difference lies in the legitimacy of the content, because a documentary has the pretense to be a representation of actual facts. Almost as if stubbornly refusing the idea that it's actually mediating the fact to the whims and the wants of the director. As if to pretend this is a document of truthful truth and fact. And yet, at the same time, they still want these documentaries to win film festivals, which is almost hypocritically counterproductive to what was the original intent of the documentary. It's really, really tricky to pinpoint the position of documentary filmmaking in the world of art and filmmaking in general. So yes.
It's very, very tricky because like here's just a fun fact for every sort of writer out there. Documentaries are a lot of the documentary is like pre-written and sort of pre-production, just to see plan out like what you're going to shoot and all that. So basically the filmmakers do actually have an idea of what they want to shoot. It's like, oh, I'm going to make this story about this woman who's living in the garbage, about this, basically make a complete story and whatever happens afterwards. So it's a lot of it's planned out.
Yes, one could make the philosophical argument that the author of a film decides a direction the film is going to take the second you turn on the camera. Even if you don't have a long-term plan, you've already made a conscious decision to film something, and that inevitably will reflect your personal point of view, regardless of intent, regardless of the chimera of objectivity.
Exactly, because it's very hard to like take any sort of like bias out of any sort of project you do. There's always going to be a bias or POV that you're going to have to shoot from, because it's going to be it's hard for the mind of the director and all that.
Again, I'm not against the idea of documentary. I'm against the idea that some people might have of documentaries. Yeah. That's my whole crux with the genre. So anyway, we're talking about documentary filmmaking in a comic book podcast.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. Just going back to do Mr. Watterson, we'll just talk about. It's basically the sort of talking head sort of thing, and just the myriad of like famous actors and all of that coming up and just basically talking about their experiences with Calvin and Hobbes. So basically, this movie is not really about the making of Calvin and Hobbes. It's more about the
impact.
Yeah, the impact of it on.
How can you make a making of documentary of a comic strip?
Yeah. If you had Mr. Watterson basically come and basically this is how it came about and all that, that's how I would try to do.
I remember actually a film that was exactly like that. I think it was made in the 50s. It was actually just the famous painter Pablo Picasso coming on screen to paint a painting in real life.
Okay.
It was quite an experience, let me tell you. So again, if Bill Watterson were to do something akin to what Pablo Picasso did back then, that would be so good. That would be so great.
That would explode the minds of so many comic fans, artists, and everyone. Even
though, come to think of it, that's pretty much what everyone does on Picarto TV nowadays.
Yeah, sure. I guess he could be able to do it now.
Yeah. So Pablo Picasso pretty much anticipated everyone over 60 years ago.
Yeah. Picasso just trademarked Picarto TV. They're just there. Give all the money to his family.
I kind of like the mascot for Picarto TV.
I'm trying to remember what the mascot was.
It's a quintessential anime girl with rainbow color there. Basically human Rainbow Dash.
Yeah.
With a hoodie. That's
right. Yeah.
Anyway, so we're done with Calvin and Hobbes, and momentarily we're done with documentaries. We might actually talk more about documentary filmmaking in the future, because there's a lot more to say about it, honestly.
Yeah.
We cannot do justice to the whole genre, to the whole medium, with just 10 minutes of this discourse. Anyway, let's actually go to the bonus update round. There it is again. Boom.
Yeah, bonus.
Okay, so you start off. What do you recommend this week for our webcomic readers out there?
I shall recommend Slightly Damned. It's yes, Slightly Damned.
Slightly Dan?
Yep, Slightly Damned.
Can you spell it out for me? Sorry.
Yeah, slightly, like S-L-I.
I get that.
And damned. Like
Slightly damned. Okay.
Yeah, damned to hell.
Oh, this seems interesting. Expand.
Yes, the story starts with this little. I'll say I don't know the exact race of the character, but it's basically this little fuzzy character named. This fuzzy character gets thrown into hell after she gets murdered, and basically winds up being, because she's so good and so bad, that she winds up just being in the middle and just lands in the ring of the Slightly Damned and gets to meet up with all sorts of demons and all that.
You know, there is a name for the Slightly Damned ring.
Yeah, purgatory.
It's called the Limbo.
Yeah, I believe they said it sort of as limbo in the ring of the Slightly Damned. And so,
so what happens in this limbo?
Basically, there she just gets to sit around and just do nothing with basically her new demon friend, a very lovable sort of demon named Buaro, who's basically this purple demon who's got this big goofy smile on him. A big doofus who basically tosses rocks into the air and bashes itself on the head. Just a fun, goofy adventure to begin with. And from there, Riken and Buaro, you look so enthralled by but basically, it's all about an adventure stemming from demons, angels, and humans, and basically this whole like outer world sort of thing. And the adventure basically mainly starts when they finally escape hell, escape hell, and then basically this whole hell becomes breaking loose. Demons are up on the main world, just killing humans, kidnapping angels, and I'm not even sure like what the overall main thing is yet. Like the whole like mythos of the whole world is like put up plain. Like there's like guardians and all that, guardians, humans, and all that wars. But we still don't know what the demons' plans are. We don't know what they're doing with angels. We don't know how they're going to take over the world and all that sort of stuff. It's a complete mindfuck of a series on an actual like world perspective. But what I really love about the series is that the characters are so gosh darn adorable. It's a very funny series, very heartwarming too. Like the main demon, Fuaro, it's just such a nice character. He's a weakling as a demon. Like he sets himself on fire with his fire magic. He hits himself in the head with rocks and all that, and he cries all the time. He's like a stupid little brother, and he just hits you right in the heart. And then he falls in love with an angel and all that. It's a very cute series deep down, with a very like deep, thick subtext to it.
You know, you just described the plot of a regular Disgaea game. That's that's pretty much.
Yeah.
Well, intertwined with an arc from Bastard.
Yeah.
Except with likable characters, as you described them. So.
But yeah, the artwork over the ages done by the artist Chu, as she goes by online, has improved over the years until like she has like a very distinct style to them. And if you want to check out the artwork and all that, go to slightlydan.com, see her artwork, see her comics and all that. Like her comic is award-winning and all that. Winning the, I believe, I forget the name. It's basically the award. It's based on a constellation of the bear, and she won that award a few years.
Orsa
Major. The Orsa Major Award or something like that. And so it's an award-winning comic. Yeah,
sadly enough, the only comic book award that I know is the Eisner Award, which is the most notable.
Yeah. Yeah, these are for like more webcomics, I believe. Believe it or not.
Oh, that's good. How long has this series been going on?
It's been going on for quite a few years. I'd say it started off in like the early 2000s, and just over years and years, and then it just got to this point.
How many pages there are of it?
How many pages? It's been going on for quite a while. Probably. I'm
saying this because Homestuck has been going on since 2009, and it has about 10,000 pages.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to calculate.
Not 10,000 pages. No, not that many. I'm trying to. She puts more effort into it, and she's gone on hiatus. She's got books out. 800, I want to say, of her book, basically put into like 4 different books, I believe. There's a beginning book in hell.
She actually published those.
Yeah, she's published them herself, and now she saw them at conventions and all that.
That's great. That's a big one you just recommended. Nice. I just had a simple, really basic joke of the week comic that started off this year to recommend. Nothing spectacular, but just something to waste your time with.
Yeah.
It's titled. It's not Slightly Damned, but it's titled Too Much Caffeine. Like I said, it started off in February 2016. It's a joke of the week format, like every other webcomic ever made. It's a self-insert comic, like every other webcomic ever made. So we have the weekly comical vicissitudes of the main character artist, her boyfriend, and 2 additional characters that are based off their pets. There is the pet dog, a female dog, which in the comic she's portrayed like a quintessential Fursona character. She's an anthropomorphic dog with Rainbow Dash wings for some reason. I don't get it. It's artistic license, I guess. Yeah. Oh, and there's the other additional character, which is based off a sort of salamander animal that they have. I have no idea what's that's supposed to be, but it's a comic representation. It's actually a teenage boy with weird fish-like things coming out of the side of his head. Like strings of the salamandery.
I'm not sure what those things are either.
I don't know how to describe them, but he has those, and apparently this boy seems to have a crush on the artist's boyfriend. He seems to be into cross-dressing. So the comic is just that, just weekly vicissitudes, escapades of comedy with very specific setups and punchlines. There is not a continuing narrative, at least not for now. There are recurring characters doing the recurring stuff. And probably the funniest page, the funniest update, is the one in which all the characters revert to their real-life selves. Which is actually supposed to represent a psychedelic trip induced by a magic potion that the artist drank. So she drinks that potion, and she dreams everybody to look like they do in real life. So it's kind of funny, especially if you see the dog with plastic wings on its back. So check it out. It's on Tumblr, Too Much Caffeine, tumblr.com, link in the description. So that's my very simple recommendation. I needed something relatively quick to dispatch for this bonus update round, because now I get to talk about Homestuck.
Hooray! So what is Homestuck? How do you describe it?
What is Homestuck indeed? Homestuck is not an entity that's bounded by your common definition of media or art forms. It's not a comic in the strictest form of the word, or sense of the word, I should say. It is not something that you can actually publish or distribute in any other form of media, because it is already all forms of media combined into one ginormous entity that could only exist and sustain itself in the web. So what is Homestuck? Well, you should probably be asking what isn't Homestuck. Because everything is Homestuck, and Homestuck is everything. Homestuck is love. Homestuck is life.
Well, for what I've seen of Homestuck, it was basically like a panel comic. Basically, one panel like uploaded each time it's updated, and then it's something they're a GIF animated over top of it.
You, my poor friend, you know nothing, Jon Snow. But let's start from the beginning. Opening. MS Paint Adventure was a website made around 2007 by one artist, Andrew Hussey. Basically produced a series of web comics that were actually structured much like a text adventure game from the 80s. In the ones in which you would have to put in an input, a phrase such as do this and do the other thing, take object, observe something, and you would have to type that action on the actual game. That's how text adventure games used to be. They also were better known by snobby persons as interactive novels.
Yeah, yeah.
So he basically took the system, the format of interactive novel, and adapted it to a weekly, daily, monthly, whenever webcomic update format. The way this comics would work is that the artist would provide a premise, such a character to name, a setting, and all that. And the readers would actually have to decide what actions are to be taken next. And they would select those actions by suggesting them in the forum of the website. Basically, imagine a thing like Twitch plays Pokemon.
Okay.
Except it's not happening live. And the majority of votes, of decisions, of inputs will determine the action for the next panel.
Okay.
That's how MS Paint adventure stories would work. That's what the Andrew Hussey trademark already was before starting Homestuck. The panels were, as the name of the website suggests, they were drawn with MS Paint. They have a charming, amateurish nature to them that's actually very much embraced by the various stories. It's like it knows, it's aware that it's charmingly simple, and it's wearing its aesthetic presentation like a badge, encased in self-irony and self-deconstruction. And that sets basically the basis for what Homestuck will eventually turn out to be, because it does start off as, again, a text adventure game, in quotation marks, with a visual aspect to it, and people deciding the action of the character, the day by day or weekly by weekly, whenever there is a next update, actions of the character, while the author, Andrew Hussey, has actually a controlled vision, overall vision for the story as a whole. So the actions taken by the decisions of the fans were more for an immediate sort of interaction with the environment.
Okay.
But the bigger plot turmoils, so to speak, were handled by the author. It was a healthy meet-up between reader and artist, halfway through the road, so to speak. Ideally, it worked even too well. And before too long, we get to the animated GIFs pages. Again, basically showcasing a particular action that was taken. And then, before too long, we get to the page in which there is a full-fleshed animation with a fully composed soundtrack, providing a major plot point or setting up a major universal set piece.
Yeah, okay.
And so on. And that's how Homestuck basically begins. The great thing about Homestuck is that, again, it basically eventually evolves into becoming an all-encompassing multimedia devourer that takes every form of pre-existing formats of communication and artistic interpretation into its own account, uses them as its groundwork for its own universal building, characters, lore, and plot points, but at the same time it constantly drenched itself in this self-deconstructing irony that, again, wears the various source materials that compose its inner structure like a badge, again, encased in that awareness. Basically, Homestuck feels like an allegory for postmodernism,
Okay. Yeah.
which would make it postmodernist. So, like I said, the very, very, very basic, at least at the stage that it is now, because I know in the future it's going to eventually lose its core aspect of the text adventure interactive aspect, because the story becomes too big to handle in that format. But for now, the very basic Homestuck is a text adventure game with visual components mixed in with various other forms of media, such as flash animations, browser mini games, the likes of point-and-click adventure games to explore an environment, which is great, or self-aware parodies of RPG battles, because it's constantly self-aware.
Yeah.
And also eventual dialogues in between characters are actually provided through a parody of Instant Messenger.
Yeah.
Which is, in the universe of the story, it's called Pester Chum. So, yes, basically every time there is a dialogue in between characters, it's in the format of an Instant Messenger type of chat room.
Yeah. Okay.
And through all of these means, we are able to be invested in the characters and the world, the increasingly more complicated, complex, and intricate world that they inhabit. And the characters themselves are actually characterized in a magnificent way, in spite of the interactive element that might turn them into just avatars for the readers. That's not the case, because not only their on-screen actions pretty much communicate nuanced details about their personalities, but the various dialogue lines in the Pester Chum log also provide a fantastic presentation and development for their own personalities. And I'll talk about the characters in a moment, because there is so much to say about them too. There is so much to say about everything. But basically, Homestuck is an entity that's sustained by basically the whole that composes the internet in all of its iterations.
Mm-hmm.
And in a further example of metatextuality, the actual universe described and presented in the story of Homestuck works like an ever-evolving video game. You know, to make things even more metatextual, because they weren't enough already.
Yeah.
All characters in the story, they have an ridiculously complex inventory system called the captcha log. I see what you did there. Captcha log. There is a recurring gag with the captcha log of the main character, which is called John Egbert. He has a limited inventory. They all have limited inventories that work in really convoluted ways. But again, that's the joke. It's making fun of inventory systems in video games. Mm-hmm. That's the satirical element, recurring satirical element of the Homestuck experience that's always there, one way or the other.
Yeah.
So the joke, the recurring gag with the captcha log of John Egbert is that whenever he tries to put in a new item in an already filled up inventory, the last object in that row of his inventory will be catapulted away from his mullet space at bullet speed, always breaking through things. And it's absolutely hilarious. So that's just one marginal example of the humor, the really witty, self-aware humor employed in Homestuck. And already I'm seeing similarities between the writing in Homestuck and the writing in Undertale, because I mentioned before that Toby Fox, creator of Undertale, actually made a name for himself by working with Andrew Hussey for various soundtracks for the more interactive pages of Homestuck.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And the soundtracks are pretty solid too. They suit the moment and the dramatic nature of a situation. And there is this one final flash animation at the end of Act 2 that's absolutely breathtaking, even though it only serves to confuse me even more on what the hell is going on, because by the end of Act 2, let me tell you, by the end of Act 2, it has become one of the most intricate, convoluted, and a tad overwhelming narratives I've ever come across. It still holds up on the merits of its own writing and the characters, and its increasingly more and more clever metatextual game of deconstructive, ironic nature, still perfectly intertwined with a legit storytelling. It's both simultaneously ironic and sincere in its approach to universal building storytelling and is satirical nature. And actually, that's, I noticed, a very much a leitmotif in the actual story of Homestuck. The dichotomy between irony and sincerity, which is reflected in the characters' behaviors, personal backgrounds, and directions that they have. For example, John Hagbert is a sincere, honest fan of bad films. He has a poster of Little Monsters in his room. He has a poster of Con Air in his room. He loves to reference John Malkovich holding a plushy bunny hostage. Like, don't move or the bunny gets it. And it becomes an actual plot point at some point during a fight against an evil imp that's invading his home when he's stuck in an alternate dimension. More on that later. It's confusing. There is the cool kid, Dave Strider. This guy.
Yeah.
This is a child of the age of irony. Is misguided to think that enjoying things ironically is the only way to go, is what makes you cool, basically. We've all been on that phase in which we only enjoy things ironically, or at least we pretend we enjoy them ironically, perhaps not realizing that we're actually sincerely enjoying them, because enjoying things ironically is an oxymoron in its own right. And I like to think that the writing is probably the most funny when it's about to describe the activities of Dave Strider and his culture of irony and sense of satire, which everybody keeps misunderstanding on the internet, what satire really means. So, and yes, it pretty much points out what has been the nature of the web and the people interacting on the web in the very period of time in which Homestuck began, which is 2009 at that point. It's a story that has evolved with the internet, I'd like to say, for better and for worse. And then Dave Strider is forced to confront the fact that his big brother, whom he thought was a genius of satire, actually has a realistic fetish for puppets. So there's all of that going, which will lead to an epic showdown with his brother on a rooftop, while the world is being destroyed by a rain of meteorites. More on that later. And then there is the character, the secondary main character so far, of Rose, which is the second character we are officially introduced in the Homestuck universe. And she's a goth girl with a certain amount of passion for the creative writing. And when I say creative writing, it's purple prose all the way. Which makes sense considering she's a fan of the old gods. There is a parody of Cthulhu called Fatulu. Also, she has this day-to-day recurring showdown with her mother that she hates. Her mother hates her, and she hates her in return. Basically, speaking of irony, her mother has actually embraced this concept of irony by ironically indulging in her daughter needs while being openly condescending about it. Basically, they being at each other's throat in the most passive-aggressive way possible. It is possibly the most unhealthy, completely unhealthy and psychologically endangering home that's been presented to us in the Homestuck universe so far. It's really funny at points, but it stops being funny when you actually think of the implication of having basically freaking Joan Crawford as your mother. Yikes.
Yeah, wow.
And there is this quote-unquote showdown between her and her mother that basically plays out like, again, a showdown of passive-aggressiveness. There is this really funny moment in which, it's fully animated by the way, this really funny moment in which Rose actually deploys her special move, which is empty suicide threat. Oh boy. So, like I said, irony versus sincerity, a leitmotif, recurring theme in the overall of Homestuck, which is again both reflected in the narrative, in the characterizations, and reflected in the very structure of Homestuck.
Okay.
So, and with all that said, what actually happened in Homestuck?
Oh my god, after all of that, we haven't even discussed like what's happening in Homestuck.
No! I told you this was long. This was going to be incredibly long. Okay, I'll try to be concise about it. Basically, John Egbert is stuck in his house waiting for the copy of a beta MMORPG. It's actually not a RPG, but it is an MMO game called Sburb, I do believe. Basically, the way that this game works, it overtakes reality. It works on a two-player basis. One who is in control, and one who is actually a playable character of himself in the world.
Okay.
So basically what happens is that as soon as the game arrives and John Egbert actually installs the game, right after having a showdown with his father, who is in love with pranks and baked goods,
Yeah.
which is also, again, fits with the overall theme. When the game is installed, John's universe turns into The Sims. Literally. So we have Rose playing with him, basically controlling his reality, making stuff appear out of nowhere, building other extensions to the house, and also summoning a few suspicious artifacts that may or may not be the direct cause of the end of the world. So basically, by the end of Act 1, John Egbert's house is about to get hit by a random meteor, which must have been summoned by the game itself.
Okay, wow.
And when we get to Act 2, it is implied that these kids, and various other kids playing this game throughout the world, basically caused the apocalypse. And there is a constant rain of meteors just bombarding the Earth. And John actually gets stuck into a dimension that devoid of time and space, and he's literally homestuck at that point. Title drop. And at this point, and it's at this point that the story decides that he hates me, so it actually starts up going back and forth between time and space. So we have the present time happenings in Rose's own scenario, her trying to actually make her computer work because of a rain, there is no electricity, so there is all that going on. Meanwhile, there is a firestorm basically outside her manor, and that is present time. Then we go past a few hours to see what Dave Strider is doing. The cool kid that enjoys things ironically.
Yeah.
And then he gets overwhelmed by his brother's passion for puppets, which he initially mistook as satire.
Yeah.
And then we go to the future of several uncounted years in the future, when the world is nothing but a desertified post-apocalypse, and we get to see the point of view of this weird alien creature with a carapace that's been alone for far too long, that somehow gets to interact with the forum system of Homestuck, taking the place of the actual readers.
Mm-hmm.
And while all that is going on, there is also a fifth storyline involving a character that's yet to be presented to us. All the while, there is John Egbert stuck in this dimension void of time and space, dealing with impish creatures, overtaking his house, kidnapping his father, and then there is the ghost of his dead grandmother intertwined with a jester entity that's supposed to be the tutorial Navi of the game, I think. And then we get the dumpiest of exposition dumps about this world that he lives in, called the Medium, which is somewhere in between the forces of good and evil, and there is a war coming and the Earth cannot be saved. And then John Egbert has a temper tantrum, because yes.
No.
So did you get all that?
No.
I know! You would have to read it for yourself. It's actually far more entertaining than I made it sound, but by gosh, it demands your commitment with the story. It really demands it.
It really does. Oh, I still can't believe you had all of that, like, pre-explaining the actual story.
And these were only the first two acts. By the end of the first two acts, it is the most convoluted story with 5 different timelines, all converging together at some inexplicable point in the universe.
Oh my god. Hopefully...
Oh, and there's more. So Rose has the brilliant idea of actually trying to communicate to the world how to play the game properly and not to destroy the world in the form of an FAQ document. So that's also another little clever bit of metatextuality. And you know, what really hits me about Homestuck is the supreme attention to details that you can find in this interactive digests. For example, in the story, Dave Strider actually made his own horrible webcomic inside the webcomic. So what did Andrew Hussey do? He actually went and produced an entire fake website for that webcomic inside the webcomic. And you can actually see all of the pages and updates that have been made up until that point.
Wow.
That is the level of detail and dedication that Homestuck has, and really sets it apart from everything else you might come across on the internet.
Wow.
This is big. Immediately,
Yeah.
this is big. This is such a rich and complex universe. I mean, all the stories, all the elements you can extract from it and just go with them whenever.
Yeah.
And I am yet to be introduced to the troll characters.
And the troll
Which-
characters, those guys with like the
Yes.
the candy cane
Yes.
horns.
I know.
Always
I
wondered
know.
what those horns were.
And I know they are coming. I don't know when they're coming, but I know they are coming. And I'm simultaneously apprehensive, but also excited about it.
Yeah, because they are everywhere, like at cons and all that. I had no idea where they were. And
Oh,
thought,
I know.
oh, yeah.
Also, there are multiple sets. There are multiple sets of troll characters throughout the years of Homestuck too. So,
Oh god. Oh god. Oh my gosh. I can't follow any of that. I don't understand anymore.
It's a bit overwhelming if you have somebody to dump all of this exposition to you like I did. But if you go, gradually from page one, it is a naturally engrossing experience.
Yes,
So
yeah.
you should do that, actually.
Yeah, I read like the first few pages. I got a ton more than I got from just that exposition. I was like, oh my god, I'm so confused now. Oh, like yeah, I guess will look at it by myself just to see what it's like.
Okay, but
I want to see those animation segmented, especially. They sound interesting.
yes, well, the first one you will come across is actually the official presentation of the title of
Okay.
the whole saga. The best moments are animated, the most important and dramatic ones. They are all interesting and breathtaking in their own ways, even though the animation might be primitive by today's standards. But Andrew Hussey, make no mistake, he's a 360-degree artist. He also had occasionally other artists collaborating with him for one of the pages. For example, some pages are just, like I said, a mini browser game that's been developed by someone else. There is this whole page in which you get to mess around with a DJ disco set that Dave Strider owns. It has all the functionalities of a professional dubstep machine. It's it's again that attention to detail that's nothing but inspiring. So I guess that's my experience with Homestuck so far. I guess I'll get back to you once I get to read more of it.
Oh yeah, sounds good. Hopefully I have read more by then, so I can actually follow it better.
Just by talking to you about this, you have been mentally destroyed. Well, as confusing and overwhelming as it may sound, it's still far more understandable than Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah.
So there's that. You can live in the comfort that nothing will be worse than Kingdom Hearts in that regard.
Yeah, I guess. I'm sort of honestly feeling like I could follow Kingdom Hearts better than this right now.
Trust me, you won't. Mostly because, like I said before, Homestuck has a primarily comedic tone to it, with occasional edges of drama and complicated hinted subtexts, which makes for a gratifying read through and through. In fact, I'd like to talk about for a bit the narrative style of Homestuck, specifically the beats of text that are, as you saw for yourself, right under the file or image or what have you. It has this indifferent, detached sarcasm that I would associate with Douglas Adams' book, in the way it describes things in a dry and humorous way at the same time. It feels like a proper British kind of humor.
Yeah.
In fact, I kind of imagine in my head that John Cleese is narrating all this. It would be great if John Cleese. So there's that. Oh, and again, the narration has subtle changes to suit the personality of a given character. For example, when you will eventually get to the Dave Strider portion of the story, the narration will try to have a more urban edge to it, which only makes it funnier because of how utterly pretentious this kid is.
Yeah. Okay.
So yes, this was Homestuck, the recap and analysis segment of Andrew Hussey's Homestuck. I hope I have provided a sufficient amount of data, information, and analysis to give you a mild idea of how Homestuck works at a fundamental level.
Yeah, you sure did. I felt that whole dump truck come back and just pour it all on me.
Well, I read the first two acts.
Yeah.
and so much happens in just the first 2 acts. There are 7 acts, and they are all very, very, very long.
Yeah.
So I guess next time we'll see more of me talking about Homestuck.
And more of me feeling tortured. It's like, oh my god, stop dumping this all on me. I don't understand it at all.
And that's why I'm urging you to read it.
Yeah.
If you actually are intention to read it, I should actually avoid more spoilers from now on. Because I kind of spoiled to you most of the first 2 acts.
I think it's spoiled to everybody. So, spoilers.
And yet, at the same time, I have not told you anything at all.
Not so spoilers.
I mean, even if I told you, which I did, the general bullet points of these first 2 acts, trust me, the individual moments, they will get you so off guard. I cannot help but comparing this with Undertale, and the comparisons are so comparative, so to speak. Undertale is also another kind of story that relies both on self-deconstructive irony and a sincere want for a good story to go with it. And I can definitely see why Toby Fox is a Homestuck guy.
Yeah.
It's great when all the things you like happen to be interconnected and intertwined with each other in the most unpredictable of ways.
Yeah.
I cannot wait for the Megalovania page, honestly. And I know that's going to be like page 5,500 and something, so it's going to be a while before that.
Yeah. Stay tuned for that.
Anyway, this has been the Homestuck segment again, and I guess now we have reached the end of this podcast.
That's the end of the paper pit, I guess.
Let's wrap up the paper pit.
Yeah.
So this has been Madhog Die Master, also known as Madhog Strider.
And I'm WhyBoy of Toongrin, and oh god. And I gotta read more Homestuck so I can just know what's going on.
Yay, more Homestuck for everyone. I actually want more people as possible to read Homestuck because it's really good. It's really, really good. I don't know if I remember to say that it's really, really good because I've been describing all of its intricacies. But yes, in case it wasn't clear enough, Homestuck is really, really good. So go check it out, and I shall talk more about it next time on the next edition of Homestuck, right here on the Paper Pig Podcast. Good night, everybody!
Bye-bye!